I'm Kat Colmer. I'm a teacher librarian and a young adult author, and I'm really excited to be taking part in the YA Room's month of LoveOzYA. For my contribution, I'd like to read a short story called Sweet Bombe Alaska. It's about a scholarship kid named Kahled who starts at a posh new private school. Sweet Bombe Alaska. First day. The fashion tragic piling hot chips on his plate. I followed the line of Simon's fork across the lunch hall. That's Bainbridge. The pudgy teacher was hard to miss. His fluoro pink shirt was so loud it squealed. We call him Parabola, Simon said from the other side of the table, because his gut is a perfect example of a curve based on a conic section. He sniggered over a fork stacked with ravioli. He's not a bad maths teacher, CJ said beside me. Just make sure you hand in your homework. Bainbridge is quick to slap you with detention, even if your excuse is legit. Gave me 4 last semester, Simon said around a mouthful of pasta. He chewed, swallowed, got out of all of them. Yeah, made his daddy call and threaten to cut funding for the new science block, didn't he? CJ said. Simon just shrugged and shoveled more food into his mouth, while I made a mental note to stay in Parabola's good books. Unlike Simon, I didn't have a parent with clout to ring up and complain. The puke-like smell of parmesan wafting off Simon's lunch was putting me off my sandwich. Other than that, my first day at Armsworth Grammar was turning out okay. 325 wasn't far off, and so far no one had asked any awkward questions. As I watched the steady stream of summer blazers and pleated skirts surge through the lunch hall doors, my hand reached for the lapel of my own uniform. The expensive wool was soft, almost silk-like, the complete opposite to the government school polyester zip jackets I'd worn for the last 11 years. Thank God the scholarship included a new uniform. Nothing shouted scholarship kid louder than a badly fitting blazer and faded second-hand pants. Not even Parabola's pink shirt could divert that kind of attention. They'd find out eventually, but until they did, I wanted to enjoy the illusion, the never-gonna-happen fantasy that I was like the rest of them, with loaded parents, a holiday house in the south of France, and my biggest problem deciding whether I wanted a BMW or Golf for my 18th birthday. Simon gave up scanning the lunch hall for the other teachers he could give me the rundown on. Instead, he nudged me with his shoulders. Enough of the stiffs. He tipped his head at a group of girls sitting at a table to the side of us. Now for the ladies, he said with a grin. CJ rolled his eyes. Here we go. Shut it. Simon threw him a look meant to intimidate, but on his clean-cut country road catalogue face, it just looked constipated. This is important, Simon continued. So Kahled here doesn't go making an idiot of himself. Simon turned his preppy face my way. Right. The blonde over there with the ponytail is Emma Tauber. Hot, but no joy there. She's going out with Mark Bush, captain of the basketball team. Simon gazed longingly at Emma for a moment before snapping out of it. That one with the short black hair? He pointed to a girl sitting opposite Emma, her back to us. Jasmine Tang. We went out for a bit last year. Simon sucked the inside of his cheek, then let go with a loud pop. She's okay, but I got bored. CJ snorted, more like she dumped you. That earned CJ another constipated look. 'Cause she knew I was bored, bird brain. She got in first and broke it off before she lost cred. CJ shook his head, but Simon ignored him and went on to name the other 3 girls at the table, listing their relationship status and probability of them saying yes if I were to ask them out. He should have saved his breath. I wasn't asking anyone out in a hurry. Any interested fish in these privileged waters would swim in the opposite direction as soon as they realized I came from the scholarship pool. Simon was rattling off facts about someone standing in the cafeteria line when a girl on the other side of the lunch hall caught my attention. She sat alone at a corner table. Her face half obscured by a heavy curtain of smooth mahogany, she nibbled at a sandwich while she devoured a novel. No chance, Simon mumbled around a mouthful of something. That's Hannah Owens. We call her Bombe Alaska. Bombe Alaska? Like the dessert? I asked. Yeah, hot on the outside but cold in the middle. I turned just in time to catch him pretend to shiver. Her dad's some big shot lawyer. He's the Owens in Spencer and Owens, both CJ's eyebrows lifted with meaning. I nodded, like I knew what he was talking about. And she's up herself, Simon continued. Got her nose up so high she's constantly sniffing ceiling paint. I invited her to spend New Year's on our yacht. Told Dad, toasted every New Year with a bottle of that fancy Dom Perignon stuff. This time CJ closed his eyes when he shook his head. I clamped down on my lip to keep from laughing. I think you mean Dom Perignon? Maybe I didn't know what it was like to count in New Year's on a yacht, but at least I knew the difference between a rock and fancy French champagne. Simon frowned at me. Isn't that what I just said? Anyway, that wasn't good enough for Bombe Alaska. He stabbed the last of his ravioli with his fork. Maybe if your parents pull more than 7 figures a year, you might have a chance. In that case, I had less than no chance. Ever thought she's just not interested? CJ asked. Simon cocked a brow. What? Nah, she's a snob. Like Parabola's gut, his voice bulged with conviction. Just then, Hannah glanced up from her book. Our gazes brushed, locked. Something guarded, almost defiant, flashed in her eyes. Then the shrill sound of the bell set the sea of Armsworth grammar students into motion, taking Hannah with it. Part 2, Revelations. After lunch, I had double English, one of the few classes I didn't share with Simon or CJ. I checked my timetable against the map of the school, making sure I was heading in the right direction. The campus was an impressive mashup of turn-of-the-century sandstone and sleek glass meets steel. Either way, both old and new structures were a stark contrast to the weatherboard 3-bedder I'd lived in all my life. When I walked into room 347, the teacher wasn't there yet, but most of the seats were already taken. I assessed my options. Back row next to a guy who looked like he could crush walnuts in his armpits. Empty desk smack in the middle of the front, or second row near the window, next to Hannah Owens. She glanced up just as I put my bag by the seat next to hers, and I could have sworn the room temperature dropped suddenly. The look she gave me froze my intended hi dead on my tongue. This sit free? I mumbled instead. Jaw clamped tight, she scanned the classroom, checking my other seating options just like I had done seconds before. When her forehead creased and an annoyed sigh escaped her lips, I knew she'd taken pity on me. Guess so, she said, then picked up her novel and buried her nose in it, her leave me alone message loud and clear. I started pulling my English texts from my bag. I'm Kahled, I said. Figured it would be rude not to introduce myself. Hannah didn't even look up, and for a moment I started to think Simon might have been right about the Bombe Alaska. Then another sigh, more exasperated this time. She glanced my way, lips an uninviting line. Hannah, she said, and turned back to her reading. Silence. Something rubbed inside me, dared me to ignore her cold shoulder. Good book, I nodded at her novel. You like John Green? I gave myself a silent high five when she looked up and held my gaze. Several expressions flitted across her face as her desire to be left alone went head to head with her curiosity. Curiosity won. Have you actually read this or just seen the movie? She pointed to her copy of The Fault in Our Stars. I've read it. Read most of his stuff. My favourite is Paper Towns, but Looking for Alaska was also good. Hannah blinked several times. I couldn't read what was going on behind her wide hazel eyes, but damn if I didn't mind looking into them anyway. If you're into the sick lit, try Me, Earl and the Dying Girl. Can't remember who it's by, but I was sold. Got to give points to a book about cancer that has so many laugh-out-loud moments. Her brows drew up. Then the corners of her lips twitched and she smiled. I swear, that very moment, the temperature in the room climbed a fraction of a degree. It took almost 2 weeks and another 9 English lessons before the chill around the second room window in room 347 disappeared completely, and I realized that Hannah's cold demeanor was just a thick protective coat she wore. It took close to the rest of the term and a pair work English assignment to piece together why she felt the need to wrap herself up this way. First, I noticed her uniform, even though Hannah went to great lengths to avoid it being noticed. It was always clean and neatly ironed, never missing a button or dangling a thread. But if you knew what to look for, you saw what her meticulous grooming tried so hard to mask. The hint of grey in the white shirt that was inevitable when it has gone through too many washes. The almost too short skirt, only just reaching regulation length. And even though her shoes were polished to a black so glossy a Clark salesman would have been proud, underneath there was no hiding the giveaway overworn softness of the leather. The cookbook came next. It was week 8. We were in the library, working on our English assignment, when I spotted it at the bottom of a pile of her school stuff. 101 recipes on a budget. Now, there were several reasons why a girl like Hannah might borrow a budget cookbook. Research from a home economics assignment, except she didn't do home economics. Maybe she was borrowing it for a friend, but as far as I could tell, Hannah didn't have any friends. Or she was going to use it herself. The third clue came a few days later when I overheard Emma and Jasmine near the lockers. "Can you believe she's not going on the Kakadu trip?" Emma said. "I know. Apparently her dad is taking them to Paris instead," Jasmine told her. "I'd pick Paris over Kakadu any day." "I know. So jealous." And suddenly the pieces fell into place. When I walked into room 347 later that day, Hannah was already sitting at our desk near the window. I slid into the seat beside her. "You're not going on the Kakadu trip next term?" Hannah glanced up from the book she was reading. "No." She quickly looked back down. "We're going to Paris." "Sure," and I was booked for a space flight on Branson's Virgin Galactic. I decided to coax her truth out with my own. "I'm not going either." She turned to look at me again. "How come?" I took a shaky breath. "Because trips like that aren't included in my scholarship." I let the sentence and all it meant hang between us. Hannah's hazel eyes stayed fixed on me, and, like that first day, they gave no clue to the thoughts forming behind them. I waited for the sudden drop in temperature around the desk in the second row under the window in room 347. But amazingly, it never came. "There is no Paris, is there?" I asked. Hannah's eyes widened. There was a trapped stillness about her, like a cornered animal not knowing whether it should bolt or just give in. Then she gave the tiniest shake of her head. Later, she found me in the library. "Dad took the Porsche," she said, "and moved to Frankfurt with some woman called Annemieke." The words were heavy and wet around the edges. "Mum got the house, but almost lost it. She couldn't find work for the longest time. I had no idea how bad it was until I found a stash of unpaid bills behind her prized Swarovski crystal." I listened, my math homework completely forgotten. With each cold truth Hannah allowed me to see, I realized life lived behind expensive bricks was not always that different to life lived behind weatherboard. Part 3. Sweet warm smile. "Is it just me, or is Parabola's curve edging closer to his y-axis lately?" Simon asked as he watched Bainbridge's distinctly slimmer form make its way across the lunch hall. "He's definitely lost some of his paunch," CJ agreed. "Maybe he's shedding kilos so he looks svelte for the end of semester dance." "Probably gearing up to ask Miss What's-her-name from geography to go with him," Simon said, his eyes on the maths teacher. "He's always chatting her up during playground duty." We'd finished our lunch but weren't making any moves to leave. It wasn't all that warm in the lunch hall, but it beat the slap of frigid wind and rain outside. CJ flicked his balled-up napkin across to Simon's side of the table. "So, you planning on asking anyone?" "Yeah," Simon said. "Emma just broke up with Mark, and I reckon I'm definitely in with a chance. You asking anyone?" "Actually, someone's asked me." CJ looked sheepish. "I'm going with Jasmine." "Jasmine Tang? Asked you?" Simon's voice came out higher than usual. CJ nodded and Simon managed to look both constipated as well as confused. Then he turned to me. Guess now we just have to find you a date. I shifted in my seat, then looked across the lunch hall to a table in the far corner where Hannah was sipping a hot chocolate and reading Me, Earl and the Dying Girl. Actually, I've already got one. Simon and CJ followed my line of sight. Bombe Alaska? Simon squeaked in disbelief. No way! His voice was edging steadily higher. How did she get her to say yes? I shrugged. I told her how much my mum earned in a year. Simon's mouth fell open. Next to me, CJ started laughing. Across the hall, the corners of Hannah's lips turned up, and the warmth of a smile reached into every cold crevice of the room. Thanks for listening to Sweet Bombe Alaska, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the YA Room's month of LoveOzYA.